And welcome back to the second half of Freedom Quest with Johnnie Cochran, our special guest this afternoon. Johnny, OJ time. Can't let you go without it.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
There's very little, though, in the book about OJ. A little bit, you kind of sketch it. Has everything been said about this case that can be said? Is that why you left it out?
Well, I thought, you know, in my other book, in the Journey to Justice, I talked a lot about OJ and our role in that. In this case, I wanted to emphasize that I was here before OJ and here after OJ, but I wanted to address it in passing, at least my involvement in that. And I say in there that that case was a sea change really for all of us involved in it, because it changed our lives. I mean, clearly we all had lives before, but it was a case that gave us certainly recognition, which gave us an opportunity to give us a pulpit, if those of us who cared to speak out against the wrongs as we saw them.
Let me just read you a passage from the book. There is a reason based in history that although 12% of the population of this country is black, in my lifetime there have been only 2 African-American United States senators, only 3% of the lawyers and doctors are black, and 95% of the top salary jobs are held by white males. The institutions of this country had been sealed against African Americans for so long that while the laws may have changed, the traditions haven't. Blacks were thrilled to see the criminal justice system, with all of its idiosyncrasies, could be made to work in their behalf. Is that the reason we saw African Americans cheer when you won that victory, and white America just succumb to a sense of dread and, in some cases, hate?
Yeah, I think in large measure, I don't think that people were, you know, to go back and look at it from a psychological standpoint, black people didn't get together the night before and say, let's all get together and root for OJ. Let's do that. Let's have a party. They didn't do that. This was an overflowing of emotions that somebody who looked like them had worked within the system and had gotten some justice, at least in this instance, had been acquitted under these circumstances, under their rules. This had worked, because you got to understand, you talk to any black person, they could give you a litany of cases. If they're old enough, they'll tell you about the Scottsboro boys and what happened to Emmett Till, right, and all the way up to Rodney King won, and all those cases where everybody who looked like them never got any justice. And they felt that this was just an outpouring. And then the other thing was that we'd been told that the image of the lawyers they had seen to that point were some bumbling caricature that somebody created, and somebody like an Amos and Andy, that finally there was somebody who looked like them, could be the captain of the team, who knew what the system was about. Had been a prosecutor and a defense. You may not like the fact that you win or lose, but somebody who knew what they were doing. That it said to the young people in America that it's great if you could be like Allen Iverson, or you could be like Donovan McNabb and throw a touchdown every quarter. That would be wonderful. But not everybody can. There's only one Donovan McNabb. There's only one answer. There's only one Allen Iverson. But you can use your minds. You can be the best that you can be, as my parents told me, by using your mind and try to help others. And that's what I think that they were thinking, and much more than, say, about just cheering for OJ.
One of the things that I found most fascinating about the OJ trial was your evolution. You weren't always lead counsel. In fact, if I remember my history correctly, you came on at the invitation of both Mr. Simpson and some of the other counsel. Give us a little piece of the inside story how Johnnie Cochran took over that defense.
Well, it was interesting. I was invited by Simpson on the team. And you know, and you want to be a good team player to start with. And so I remember. Did you know
him well prior to the?
I didn't know him well. I knew him around Los Angeles, but I didn't know him well. And what was happening, I was working for Tom Brokaw. I was doing the commentary for NBC National. I was every day covering the preliminary hearing. I was trying to be fair, you know, being objective and tell them here's what they're doing here and here's what happened. And every night I would go back and I have these calls from Simpson that please come down here and see me, you know. And so he knew who I was in LA. And, you know, like we like to say that was my home court. So at least I knew what was happening down there pretty much. But I knew the time commitment more than anything else, Jerry. I knew the time commitment would require. I didn't know it would take a year, but I knew you'd be working 16, 18 hours a day for whatever period of time, and they should have put everything else on hold. So, but finally I went down and I talked to my minister. I prayed over it. I talked to my father. And my father just asked me simply one day, does he need your help? I said, you know, I guess he does need my help. So I went and became part of the team. And from the very beginning, when I got on the team, however, they weren't any trial lawyers around there. You know, Shapiro had never tried a murder case. They had the greatest experts ever assembled. They had DNA experts like Sheck and Neufeld and wonderful guys. They were from New York and everything. But I was the trial lawyer. I knew Los Angeles. I knew the jury panel. I knew the LAPD better than anybody else because I've been fighting them all those years. So I didn't know Mark Fuhrman by name, but I'd been dealing with him all of my life. So this was a case that once I got in there, it's a period of time. But what really happened was that When we got to the Christmas of 1994, we picked the jury from like September to December, and that was one of the great things that Judge Ito did for us, was allow us to pick a jury. And the jury was going to be sequestered, because that was the other thing, and people criticize all the time. This jury was sequestered. They lived in a hotel. They saw only the evidence. They didn't have to worry about it. They didn't favor anybody. They just saw the evidence. They didn't have the press telling them what they ought to do. So it was interesting. But when we got the jury, we were going to start the evidence like in January. We all had to get ready for trial. I had to get the opening statement. I had to get myself ready to do all these things. And we worked every day. During the holidays, it didn't matter. We had to work. A man's life was at stake. Bob Shapiro went to Maui. He's staying in a $1,000 a day suite, and it's pretty interesting when your client's sitting in jail and you're off under an assumed name, and you're holidaying it up, and and your pictures in the Globe and the Inquirer and all that stuff. Sometimes clients become upset about that. And by this time, it became pretty clear who knew what and who could handle this case. And that's when he made the choice. I mean, he made the choice. He called us down and said, "Look, you're going to be lead counsel. I want you to do this."
So it was Simpson's call?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he's a very active client. And I want Carl Douglas to be in charge of the discovery and everything, and you take this case on. Bob will still be on the team. We want to keep him close, obviously. And that's what happened from that point on. It was his choice. And so when Shapiro came back to being with, that's when he found out about
Judge
it.
Lance Ito takes a hit in a lot of publications about his weak or inept leadership of that trial. Do you agree with that characterization?
No, I don't really agree with that.
And you knew him prior to this?
I knew him. Yeah, he used to work for me when I was assistant DA. Ito worked in the juvenile division, so I knew him. I knew Marcia Clark. I knew Chris Darden. Again, I knew the players in this. I knew Los Angeles too, and so it was interesting because I thought that much of the criticism he got. Now, he did on occasion get a little starstruck. We'd be busy. We'd start working. We'd go from 9 to 6 every day. And if Geraldo or Barbara Walters or Katie Kirk came back, he spent a lot of time back talking with them. And we said, look, Judge, we want to try this case. I want to get out of here, But so that was the one thing I had. But as far as the rulings, we went back and looked at the end of the trial. Jerry Ullman is a real scholar. People said he favored us. That's ridiculous. 70% of the time he ruled against us. Mm-hmm. It's just that in most cases the judge probably would rule against you like 90% of the time. So you'd be thankful for little tiny favors. The other thing that he did, I can tell you, at the end of the case, they tried to get rid of him, if you remember, because his wife had been Fuhrman's supervisor. We fought to keep him on because we thought in that building, all we wanted was just a fair trial. We want somebody who was just going to be fairly level. We could deal with the rest of it. And so I thought he got a bad rap overall. And the reason why, if the jury had convicted Simpson, Judge Ito, if not on the Supreme Court, would be in the Court of Appeals. Trust me. He had all the background. He'd been a DA, he's on the judge, and all they needed was a conviction. The fact that the system worked and this man was acquitted, they had to look for excuses. They looked for scapegoats. They blamed the jury. They blamed everybody except themselves. The prosecutors did that, And I think that's unfortunate because, what kind of society do we live in that you run around? If defense lawyers ran around and had to go into therapy every time they lost, boy, they'd be in some serious trouble, wouldn't they?
They sure would.
You have to learn to live in America, and you have to take your victories and your defeats and try to do them gracefully if you can.
You call Mark Fuhrman a lying thug. Why so tough, this book?
Because that's what he is. And I think that probably if the people could see, there's still a gag order, and not more than that, there's still a restriction on the tapes. If the people,
we haven't seen the entire tape, right?
I've seen them. I've seen them, and I've heard them. No, absolutely no. Oh, Judge Ito gave us, that's right. No, I've seen them. Yes, right. Judge Ito gave you like two little versions of his so-called use of the N-word. They are so vitriolic. They are so terrible. If they saw him, they wouldn't have him on television being this grandiose hero writer going on the Oprah show and whatever, as though he's somehow rehabilitated. They would see who he is and what his attitudes were. And that's the thing I believe in redemption. I'm a Christian. I believe in redemption. But you got to say you're sorry first before you get redemption. You got to you got to demonstrate some sorrow. They haven't demonstrated anything. And it's the American way to forgive everybody, and that's wonderful except Simpson. And you can forgive people all you want. That's fine. But they should in some way some way admit their responsibility. And what he did and what he says on these tapes and what he said before that was it seems to me requires him to at least make some act of contrition, which I have not seen him do.
Until I read A Lawyer's Life, I thought you came up with the phrase, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit, but apparently you didn't.
Well, what happened was, it was kind of a combination, but Jerry Ullman, and I give him all due credit.
He was one of your assistants?
Yes, he was the dean from Santa Clara Law School, and one member of the team. He was on there before I got there. And what had happened was, before this all happened, we were sitting around talking about the fact that the evidence didn't fit. There were a lot of things they were trying to say that didn't fit. They were disconnect on certain things. And we would say, this evidence doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. What's happening here? And then one day, that's when, it was June 12th, 1995, 1 year anniversary of the killings, those horrible killings. Mr. Darden had him try on those gloves. And when the gloves didn't fit, we turned to each other and said, those gloves don't fit. If they don't fit, you must have quit. And then the mantra was born. And then, because, you know, all of my life I've tried to use statements that will synthesize what the evidence is about, because jurors are best. Those who really want to vote for you, when they go back in, they need something to hang their hats on. When I tried the case up in Buffalo, the little girl, Cynthia Wiggins, who couldn't get in the mall because they wouldn't let the inner city buses in, she got crushed going across the street, you know, and these people had built this big, beautiful mall, and they wanted the Canadians and everybody to come in there, but the people from the inner city couldn't come. I told the jury, if you design or build a mall, it must be open to one and all. So I always tried to do that.
Rhyme works.
Well,
connects with the jury.
I think they did, you know, I didn't learn that in law school. I think that, but I think
but you learned it.
I learned it. See, I'm not only like a sweet lawyer from the suites, I'm a lawyer from the streets too also.
So once you connect with the jury, the whole rhyming thing worked. You also talk about giving advice to Chris Darden to leave Fuhrman alone, but you seem to be a little hurt that he never acknowledged it and never gave you your props.
Well, you know, and it wasn't like I needed any great credit, but you know, It was interesting. In the heat of battle, and there's war inside. Trust me, the prosecutor's job isn't to win, but they were trying to win in this case. They had $10 million. They had 43 lawyers. They wanted to beat us good. But even in the face of that, I went over to him and I said, my brother, do not take Mark Fuhrman. He's a lying racist, and you shouldn't do this. You have to live in this town.
Don't take the direct examination.
Don't take the direct examination. Don't get up there and vouch for him, because this guy's a bad guy. And I didn't know about the tapes at that point, but I just cared about him. I knew after this trial, there's going to be life after the trial, regardless. He had to go on. I said, don't do it. He thought I had something up my sleeve that I was trying to like pull something on him. That's all I did not. I just cared about you. And when he came back in that courtroom and we got him for perjury, we had to plead guilty to perjury, lying in a murder case like this. Darden wasn't anywhere around because they knew. And she turned her back. Marcia Clark turned her back. Nobody would talk to him. He's in there with his bodyguards and everything. The whole paradigm had changed. And even though I didn't know about the tapes, as I tell you, one of the revolutions to me was, you know, I'm God-centered, and I always look for why certain things happen in my career. Like the Deadweiler case comes on. If you want to be a young lawyer and you want people to know about you, something happens to your career, you find out about it. Then that was the case when I first came out of the city attorney's office. Then I came back from the DA's office, and one day I got this Sellers case. These people just came in my office, and it turned out to be this remarkable case where kids hang in a jail cell. And that's how I first met Michael Batten. And we proved after 8 months of death, when they exhumed the body, he'd been choked by the police. And then somebody said, why am I here? And then somebody called me one day and told me, you ought to go listen to these tapes, and you'll be amazed at what this man has said. And Ito had ruled we couldn't go back beyond 10 years. We had to be between 84 and 94. We knew he'd made some racist statements before that. The tapes started in June of 84 and ended in June of 94. So then I understood why I was there, and that I felt at that time at least that this evidence had been sent to me for a real purpose, to demonstrate that people will lie. People would say, oh, he wouldn't lie in a murder case.
But he did.
He did lie. And he not only lied, he was convicted of perjury.
Johnnie Cochran hasn't left us yet. We've got plenty more to ask him about. The list of his celebrity clients is almost endless, and we'll be right back to find out more after these messages. And welcome back. And I'm sorry this is the last portion of the Freedom Quest edition of this week, because Johnnie Cochran, you know everybody. You represented darn near everyone famous. But before we get to some of those famous names, just in a general sense, has television reformed or deformed the way we dispense and receive justice? I'm looking now at the Robert Blake case, charged with the murder of his wife, Winona Ryder, charged with shoplifting, and then Rabbi Newlander here in South Jersey, charged with murdering his wife, well, convicted for killing his wife. Has TV changed the way we get justice in this country today?
I think somewhat. I think the one thing that the cameras in the courtrooms have done is they have those who, it probably, hopefully, improves everybody's performance a little bit. I think the judges who, from time to time, can be a little cantankerous, are probably less cantankerous when there's a lot of media around. Everybody wants to appear, you know, better than they may ordinarily appear. But I think from a basic standpoint, jurors still rise up and do their job. You don't see their faces, and that's a good thing. I think they rise up and do their job.
Should we have all courtrooms now open to TV cameras? Should federal courts be open to TV cameras?
I think so, but I think federal judges would be more responsive to people and in their decisions, and rendering their decisions if they were open. They serve for life now, and they aren't very well scrutinized. They do exactly what they want to do. And I think that I would like to see cameras in there. I think you'd see justice improve considerably.
Just you're the lawyer and I'm not. The Supreme Court could order federal judges to open its.
Well, they could change some of the rules and some of the canons, and it'd be helpful if the Supreme Court had the same thing. If the people could see how they operated, it might be very helpful.
Celebrity defendants. The list is endless. So let's start with Michael Jackson. Some of the national media has said that you won't let him talk to people like me, journalists, because of some of his most recent bizarre behavior. In essence and in brief, what is going on with Michael? The thing about holding the baby over the balcony with the face covered?
I just think that was just a mistake, and I saw where he's apologized for that, and it said that he did apologize, and there's no obvious investigation in Germany. He made a mistake, and then he's been really crucified for that.
But Johnny, his face, everyone comes up and says, Jerry, did you see his face, his nose, the hair?
You know, I think that everybody,
Is a brother okay? Is what
yeah. The last time I talked to him the last week, he's fine. He's fine. He loves those kids. He would do nothing to harm them. I think I can say that without fear of thinking. I mean, he does look different than he used to look. I mean, clearly, Jerry. I mean, and that's his own personal preference. And he is, how I choose to see Michael, he's an extremely talented person. He's one of the most talented people that I've ever seen in my life. He can do things that other people can't do. Whatever reasons he's changed his appearance, I mean, that's his business, and I just kind of deal with that. But I find him to be, he's a very bright and savvy guy.
Seeing him stand up with Al Sharpton attacking Sony about discrimination struck a little people being disingenuous, since Michael had always stressed ebony and ivory, the way of looking at life. Did that surprise you?
It did surprise me. I wasn't there that day, and I think...
Did he call you before or after he did it?
Well, no, afterwards. And my without telling anything out of school, my concern was that there are a number of African American entertainers who've really gotten the short end of the stick from the entertainment industry. And Michael takes away from that. His battle with Sony has to be fought, it seems to me, separately than what's happened to the other people who many end up penniless without medical insurance or whatever. So his battle is different. His battle with Sony has to be fought on a different plane. He can be supportive, but he can't be identified with that per se. That's my sense of it.
Puff Daddy, Sean Combs, treated differently because of his fame?
No, he was probably treated worse. You know, the reason why I got involved in that case was because they were talking about giving him 15 years in prison for like allegedly having a gun in the car. I guess probably against the law, that'd be with Jennifer Lopez. And finally, that they charged him with allegedly trying to bribe his driver, all of which charges were not true. So we spent 6 weeks in New York battling that case. And I'll tell you, the tension was so tough when that jury came in on Friday afternoon, like about 7 o'clock. They had 32 armed police officers around the place. They wanted to convict him so badly. And, you know, I was glad we fought and did it. And I said that was my last criminal case because it was difficult and it was a major battle. This prosecutor had won 19 cases in a row in that courtroom. He thought he was going to win again. And it was hard. We had to go through I think it was 17 verdicts, and we were the last 5. It was painful standing there. I mean, he and I both were reciting the 23rd Psalms at the end. And I tell you, it paid off too. And he was acquitted. I said, I'm not going to come back in criminal court anymore. And I'm so pleased that with his career, I mean, he's really doing well. You know, he's his clothing line, he's been #1 records, and he's been doing real well. He's a talented young guy.
Abner Louima, the man who was sodomized in the New York police station, who got a sizable settlement. Where is that case now? I understand that there are some appeals by the police and so forth. He's
an amazing guy. It's basically over now. There was a fee dispute over the fees, pretty much left. I saw him a couple weeks ago in New York. He's an amazing guy. What happened to him, I think, is probably the worst case of police brutality in the history of this country. But he always said to everybody that he didn't want what happened to him to be done in vain. So he recovered a lot of money, the biggest settlement in the history of the city of New York, but that wasn't the point. He wanted to change things, and I will say, on his watch, while this case was pending, you know, before this, when this happened, you could not interview a police officer. A police officer in New York was involved in a shooting or an assault. You couldn't interview him for the first 48 hours because the union had it set up. They would spend that time talking to the union, cooking up what they were going to say. That's changed now. There's a separate law firm for officers who want to come forward. And the Louima case, as heinous as that was, sodomizing a man in a police station in front of everybody, and then walking him from the sergeant's desk with his pants around his ankles, as though that would be normal behavior. And then took the first officer 5 days to come forward. And that officer has been in police protective custody after that, pretty much.
Right.
I mean, protected from other police. Now, what does that say to you? So we spoke out against that, and I hope we help change the culture. That's what we want to do, is change the culture, and that's what we have to do around this country. You see, the bad officers have to fear the good officers, and not vice versa. Right now, the good officers fear the bad officers too often, and once they change that at the top, and the people at the top will tell you this, all they can do is say, we're not going to tolerate this. You see a crime going on, you don't report it, you're going to be fired. You're going to jail. It'll change. The chief culprit got 30 years in prison. That's a pretty good disincentive to do this kind of stuff. And he stood strong throughout. Testified 7 times or more. A strong brother. We owe him a lot.
You talk very glowingly about Reginald Denny, the white truck driver who was so brutally attacked in the '92 L.A. riots after Rodney King won verdict.
I love Reginald Denny because he's the epitome of being able to walk in the other guy's shoes. He's a decent guy. I took a lot of heat for representing him. People say, you can't represent him because he's white. I said, wait a minute, excuse me. I'm opposed to injustice. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white. And it was a good thing. And I tell you what, we're in Philly, so you can appreciate this story. One day after I was representing Reginald Denny, I got a call from Bill Cosby, who said, next time you're in New York, bring Reginald Denny to see you. And we came to New York and we did that. And I can tell you, that was like 10 years ago. Since that time, it was in '92, Bill Cosby and his wife, Camille, have paid for all the education for Reginald Denny's daughter. It's an amazing story. People don't know about that. I tell you about it in the book. But that's the kind of thing that happens because
she was 11 when he got hurt.
Yeah, he's 11 years old. Because Cosby loved his attitude, his spirit, and his lack of bitterness and rancor. And so, some good things happen. Sometimes the good people, and that was one of the.
Has he recovered fully?
He'll never recover fully because but he's a good guy. He's a wonderful guy, and he never will recover to where he was before. I mean, these guys tried to bash his brains in, but he's a real good guy.
You talked earlier about the New Jersey Turnpike 4 brothers who were the victims of racial profiling, victims in the sense that they became poster children for the whole issue of racial profiling. You won a major verdict for them. Have they recovered, and are they
have pretty much
together?
recovered. They can't play. These kids were going to play basketball at North Carolina A&T. They can't. Danny Reyes, who was the police officer, shot point blank, shattered his elbow. He can't go up for a rebound like he could before. They recovered $13 million, but their lives have changed forever. They didn't lose their lives, thank heaven. The police were charged with things like attempted murder and pled to something, got a fine. So we still have a lot of work to do, even when they charge with crimes. We still have a lot of work to do.
Microsoft, you're involved in taking on the giant of giants.
It's hard. I mean, that's battling. Myself and Willie Gary have been battling that case, and it's tough. That's
What's
a very
the issue
tough
here?
issue.
Discrimination against employees?
They have some amazing employees, but what we have, the evidence we have believed is that it's a great place to work, and everybody makes a lot of money. But are the blacks making less money than whites? Are things offered to whites that aren't offered?
Where is
to
that
blacks?
case in the system now?
I think the last time, part of it has been settled. Part of it's been settled. Part of it was a class was certified in part of it, and part of it was settled where the court did not certify the class. So we don't have much left to do in that case now.
The NFL, you've taken them on as well in terms of them not hiring enough black coaches. You name the fact that they seem to be holding black coaches to a different standard. As soon as a black coach stumbles just once, he's out.
They're out.
His white counterparts get a second chance or even a third chance.
Last hired, first fired, 2 out of 32, 70% of the players are black, 6 black coaches out of 400 in the history of the NFL. These owners want to win. You would think they would give some of the black coaches like Marvin Lewis, a defensive genius, a chance. Never got even interviewed for the Detroit job. We want to give a carrot and a stick to the owners and say, look, if you diversify your panel and it's not just some sham interview process, then you might be able to get an extra draft choice at the commissioner's option. Draft choice is very important in the NFL, as you understand. So they need to have some incentive or disincentive, or maybe you lose one if you don't do.
We haven't gone to court against the NFL yet, but
no, I'd rather negotiate rather than litigate.
Does Tagliabue listen?
He's listening. He's listening, and Mr. Rooney in Pittsburgh is heading a committee. I hope we can work out, we can forge something. The unions are going to be critical. If the players come up and say, if Donovan McNabb went to the owners of the Eagles and say, look, when I get through playing, I'd like a shot at being a coach, they're going to listen to that.
Let me read you a passage from near the end of the book to get your reaction. My love for the promise of justice has never wavered. Never but a lifetime working in the legal system has forced me to deal with reality. What happens in a courtroom has little to do with real justice for defendants. As a criminal defense lawyer, I understood the system. I knew it well, and I used it for my client's benefit. That was my job, and I did it. Case closed. That sums up Johnnie Cochran?
I think it sums it up. It sums up a system where, especially criminal justice, you're innocent until proven broke. I understood that. I understood that. I speak out against that. I understand the system. I learned to play within the rules. I learned to seek justice. I loved it the first day I started, and I love it still. When I don't love it anymore, I'll do something else.
The concentration no longer is on criminal matters, but rather civil rights issues and civil matters. And you also have a reputation of being in Los Angeles, but during one of the breaks, you gave me a card that shows me you got offices everywhere.
I do. We have probably 8 offices in 8 different states, and I'm real proud of that. We have over 100 lawyers, and I'm out front, but we have some great lawyers who are administering justice in all kind of communities, whether in Memphis or D.C. or New York or Chicago or Atlanta or Los Angeles or in Alabama. Hopefully there's a new brand of justice, and people are battling every day and hopefully taking on the right cases. And I really am encouraged by that. I hope that'll be part of our legacy. Do you see more young African-American lawyers coming along to replace the Johnnie Cochran of today, so that as we get a little older, there'll be some people that take our places? I sure hope so, and I hope they hurry up out there, and I hope they're out there and they'll hurry up and come along too. And whenever I can, really, I go out and I speak to law schools and say to these young people, how much they're needed. Especially, I think, in this country over the next 4 to 6 years, we're going to need people who are willing to battle in the trenches and do that. People say all the time, what are you trying to do? And I say it this way. In my role, I try to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And we need lawyers to come along and do that. In 30 seconds, what would you tell a young person thinking about going to law school today? And really, I think the 3 keys to their success will be 1, preparation, 2, preparation, 3, preparation. Don't ever let anybody outwork you. And if you combine passion with preparation, that's a recipe for success, I guarantee you. Thank you, Johnnie Cochran. Appreciate it. My pleasure. Johnnie Cochran has been our guest here at Freedom Quest, and we hope that you enjoyed the show as much as we did. Until next time, take care.